joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
When South African President Cyril Ramaphosa took up his position as AU chair, he re-emphasized the importance of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. Please remind us about the work of this institution and why it has been rebranded AUDA-Nepad.
Thank you very much. So African Union Development Agency is the technical arm of African Union. As you mentioned quite right, it was created a while ago in 2018 based on the NEPAD Planning and Coordination Agency. Now the difference between the two organizations is that AUDA is now recognized as being the technical arm and the body that implements the Agenda 2063. So within our mandate, we to provide knowledge-based advisory service to member states and to coordinate and implement and execute priority regional projects for the member states. So when you look at the mandate of AUDA, this is the one of NEPAD Planning and Coordinating Agency, we shifted from coordinating to actually executing priority projects.
Our audio is not that great, but we're going to try our best. You're making several calls. Let's start with the one for economic solidarity, calling on all Pan-African financial institutions to support the war against COVID-19. Who specifically are you targeting, and has there been any responses?
Absolutely. So we do work with other institutions of the African Union, obviously the African Union Commission, Africa CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and we do call for a coordinated response to the leadership of our heads of state. Afreximbank is one of the organizations that we are ready to support a response from the continent. Obviously, AFDB is part of the partners, traditional partners who are ready to support us, and our traditional partners also from the UN system. But above all that, let's also remember that we do have on the continent the capacity, the technical capacity, and the financial capacity to implement, to design and implement responses to the COVID-19 crisis. So we are also calling for the financial sector, for the manufacturing sector, to come together and help us coordinate, organize this response to COVID-19. We feel it's really a matter of getting the right people to speak to each other. You know, for example, that when it comes to specific medical devices that are difficult to manufacture in most of the countries, we do have a handful of countries who are ready to produce them, not only to serve the national market, but would also be ready to export to other African countries. Thinking about the South African National Ventilator Project, for example, we also have other similar projects in other countries. Now it's only a matter of how do we ensure that they have access to the right finance and to the right market to export and to also support other African countries.
You're also calling for military and scientific solidarity. What do you mean?
Scientific solidarity in the terms of that we need to ensure that we work together, that we share knowledge, that we share intellectual property. We should also ensure that once we build this capacity on the continent, we have some kind of agreement, high-level agreement, that we need to prioritize African needs. Most of the countries that we speak to, African countries that we speak to, tell us that now that they want to get access to the global market, to be able to buy supplies, to buy pharmaceutical products, to buy medical devices, they are at the back of the queue because the volumes they're talking about is low in comparison of other friendly countries from other parts of the world. So there's also a need for us to understand that there's a mean for us to solve our issues among ourselves. So we should prioritize solutions within the continent, by African and for African.
You mentioned that at the beginning of this pandemic, only South Africa and Senegal had screening capabilities in terms of watching people at ports coming in. And you go on to mention how that has now improved. But the Africa Analysis think tank says most African health systems will not be able to withstand the COVID-19 onslaught. Have you been able to make a survey of the different African Union members in order to determine which member countries might need more help than others?
Thank you very much. We are in the process with, obviously, Africa CDC. We are in the process of understanding clearly what are the needs of the African countries. Obviously, there's a need to respond to the crisis. It is a war. It is a run against the clock. So there's a need to respond in this emergency mode, but there's also a need for us to look at the health systems more comprehensively and to understand how we can bring the support, how we can help these countries to build resilient systems. This is one crisis. This is one health crisis, and we do not believe that this will be the last pandemic African countries will face. So hopefully this will also serve as a wake-up call for us to prioritize investments in health system, in health infrastructure, but also in the health human capacity. So we are totally in the process of understanding what are exactly the needs and to organize this response in short term, but also mid and long term.
You're also lauding the relationship between the Africa CDC and the World Health Organization. What have been your observations here? How is this relationship successful?
First, you need to highlight that Africa CDC is an organ of the African Union. It was created by African Union heads of states by a decision. So it's a totally, when you look at their relationship with the World Health Organization, it's totally independent. Now, as any body in the health system and also in any system, they do engage with partners from the global UN system and also from other types of organizations. So there's, I think, a good cooperation relationship. But again, Africa CDC is totally independent when it comes to World Health Organization.
So as all the African countries are in conversation about measures to put in place, of course guided by the Africa CDC and the World Health Organization, the measures to put in place to counter this pandemic, a parallel conversation is taking place in terms of economic recovery. What kind of conversations are being held in this regard?
This is a very important point. When it comes to our support to the African Union member states, we do have a specific COVID-19 response plan. This is what we're currently putting in motion. But don't forget that we have already some other initiatives and some other programs, projects and initiatives on the ground. So we are also looking at how do we continue implementing them in the context of COVID-19. But above all this, we would like to take this opportunity to support the thought process around how do we build the socio-economic resilience post-COVID-19. The crisis has shed light on the need to build more resilient economy. You may know that the average economic growth will suffer from this crisis. Actually, some experts even forecast a negative economic growth for 2020. International Labour Organization has already warned us that up to 200 million jobs could be lost in the context of COVID-19. And don't forget that we're still dealing with the issue of climate change and its effect on lives and on economies. Actually, some experts even think that more epidemics are to be foreseen because one of the consequences of the destruction of the ecosystem is that species that were not used to cohabitate now to have to cohabitate. So we know that climate change is going to be something that we still need to think about. I think that the COVID-19 crisis and you mentioned the measures that were taken by various African Union member states, it also sheds the light on the informal economy. And hopefully we will take this opportunity to reframe and to think of, instead of spending energy and resources to try and formalize the informal economy, we should rather embrace the current informal nature of our economy and promote policies that ensure public service for all the citizens.
Fati, we hope to speak to you again as we continually try to find answers to this unfolding story. But thank you so much for your time this morning. Fati N zi-Hassane is a supervisor for human capital and institutional development at AUDA-Nepad within the African Union. Thanks for watching this.